Welcome to Gianna's Family Stories. I'm so glad you're here. Stay with me until the very end, and don't forget to drop the city you're watching from in the comments below. The first Tuesday of every month, I treat myself to breakfast at the little diner on Magnolia Street, 2 blocks from my condominium. I always order the same thing: scrambled eggs, whole wheat toast, and a large coffee with cream. I sit at the corner table by the window and watch the morning unfold on the street outside. Delivery trucks making their rounds, dog walkers juggling leashes, couples hurrying to catch the early bus. It is a small ritual, unremarkable to anyone but me, and that is precisely why I love it so much. My name is Dorothy Harmon, and I have been taking care of myself for a long time. I retired at 63 after 31 years teaching 8th grade English at Jefferson Middle School. I was not bitter about leaving. I was ready. I had spent 3 decades helping other people's children find their voices, and I felt a quiet satisfaction in that. What I had not expected was how much I would enjoy the silence afterward, the mornings with no alarm, the evenings with no papers to grade, the slow, unhurried pace of a life I had finally earned. I should mention that I have been divorced for 12 years. My ex-husband and I parted ways, cordially enough. We were 2 people who had grown in different directions and were honest enough to acknowledge it. He moved to Phoenix. I stayed in Columbus. We split everything fairly, and I walked away with enough to start over. What came next? The paid-off condo, the $180,000 I had saved, the financial stability I was genuinely proud of, I built entirely on my own, through careful budgeting, smart decisions, and saying no to things I didn't need. I will be honest with you. I knew how to say no to everyone in my life except one person. My daughter. She was my only child, and I adored her with the specific, complicated love that mothers carry for their daughters, equal parts pride and worry, bound together so tightly you can never separate them. She had her father's stubbornness and my tendency to see the best in people past the point of reason. When she called me crying at 26, telling me she had met someone, I heard the happiness in her voice, and I tried to match it. I met my son-in-law for the first time at a barbecue she hosted in her small apartment. He was tall, well-dressed, with an easy smile that he aimed at me like a flashlight the moment I walked through the door. He complimented my earrings. He asked about my teaching career with what seemed like genuine interest. He refilled my lemonade without being asked. My daughter watched him with the expression of a woman who has found something precious and is still not quite sure she deserves it. I drove home that evening with a feeling I could not name. Not dislike, exactly. More like the faint unease you feel when a door is left slightly ajar and you are not sure whether you left it that way. They married the following spring in a garden ceremony outside the city. I paid for the catering and the flowers. I told myself it was a gift, and I meant it sincerely. My daughter looked beautiful in ivory lace, and when she hugged me before walking down the aisle, I held her tight and let go of the unease I had been carrying. For the first year, things were fine. They visited on holidays. We talked on the phone twice a week. My son-in-law was charming and energetic, full of plans for the future. He worked in sales for a software company. My daughter managed social media accounts for a boutique marketing firm downtown. They seemed to be doing well. The first ask came 14 months after the wedding. My son-in-law called me directly, which he had never done before. His voice was casual, almost too casual. The way people sound when they have been practicing what to say. He explained that they were looking to buy a newer car. His current one had transmission problems, and that his credit score was good, but not quite good enough to get the best interest rate. Would I be willing to co-sign the loan? Just as a formality, he said. Just to get the rate down, they would make every payment. I would never even have to think about it again. I hesitated. Something about the word formality bothered me. Nothing about debt is a formality, but my daughter called 20 minutes later, laughing lightly, telling me it was really no big deal, that their finances were solid, that she just wanted me to know how much it would mean to them. I signed the paperwork the following week. That should have been the moment I paid attention to what I was feeling instead of to what I was being told. 4 months later, They needed help with the security deposit on a new apartment. Their lease was ending, and they had found a place in a better neighborhood. But the deposit was $3,000, and they were a little short that month due to some unexpected dental work. Could I lend them the money? They would pay me back by the end of the quarter. I transferred the $3,000. The end of the quarter came and went. Then my daughter called with exciting news. She was pregnant. The joy in her voice was real and full. And I felt it land in my chest the way only good news about your children can. We talked for an hour about names and nursery colors and all the ordinary magic of a life beginning. I was going to be a grandmother. I cried after we hung up, sitting in my kitchen with my hand over my heart. Looking back now, I understand exactly when the dynamic shifted. It was the moment they knew that news. The requests changed after the pregnancy announcement. They became more frequent and more elaborate, and they always arrived wrapped in the language of the baby. My son-in-law needed to upgrade his work equipment to handle a new project that would boost his income before the baby arrived. My daughter needed a specific brand of prenatal vitamins that their insurance didn't cover. The nursery furniture they had chosen was the safest on the market, but slightly above their budget. Each request arrived with detailed reasoning, as though they had prepared a small presentation. I gave, and I told myself it was temporary. New parents always needed extra support in the beginning. The baby was born in October, a healthy girl with my daughter's dark eyes. I drove to the hospital the morning after and held my granddaughter for the first time, with tears running down my face. She was perfect and small and smelled like something close to a miracle. Whatever complicated feelings I had about my son-in-law dissolved entirely in that moment. This was family. This was what mattered. What would you do to protect someone you love? I want you to think about that while I tell you what happened next. It was a Wednesday morning in February when my phone rang. The caller was a representative from a bank I did not recognize. She was polite and professional, and she asked me to verify my identity before she continued. I confirmed my name, my date of birth, my social security number, wondering why this bank was calling me at all. She then informed me that I had a personal loan with their institution in the amount of $47,000 and that my last payment was now 31 days past due. She wanted to know if I was experiencing financial hardship. I sat down on my kitchen floor. I did not choose to sit. My legs simply stopped working. I told her there must be a mistake. I had no personal loan with their institution, or any institution. I had no outstanding debts of any kind. She verified the loan number, the date it had been opened 11 months ago, and the address where the statements had been mailed. It was not my address. It was my daughter's apartment. After the call, I sat on that kitchen floor for a long time. My coffee went cold on the counter. Outside, the February light was thin and gray. I thought about all the times I had handed over my personal information without a second thought. The cosign paperwork. The online documents my son-in-law had emailed me to fill out for the apartment deposit. A form he had sent months ago, asking me to confirm my income for something he described vaguely as a property credit application. I had signed it. I hadn't read it carefully enough. I called my daughter. She picked up on the second ring, bright and cheerful, my granddaughter making small sounds in the background. When I explained what the bank had told me, the cheerfulness evaporated so quickly, it told me everything I needed to know. There was a pause. Then she said, carefully, that she could explain. She said her husband had found a loan program through a financial advisor that was meant to help young families build investment property. He had used my information as a co-applicant, which was standard for these types of loans, and the returns were supposed to pay it off within the year. She said it was a smart financial move, and that they had been planning to tell me once the investment started generating income. She said she was sorry I had found out this way. I asked her if she had known. Another pause. She said she had trusted her husband's judgment on financial matters. I asked her again, had she known my name was on a $47,000 loan that I had never agreed to? She said, very quietly, that she had seen the paperwork. I hung up. I want to tell you that I cried, and I did, but only for a few minutes, because something else was happening alongside the grief, something I had not felt in a very long time. Clarity. The The kind that arrives after years of telling yourself small, comfortable lies finally fall away all at once. I called my bank immediately and requested a full credit report. What arrived in my email 2 hours later was worse than I had prepared for. In addition to the personal loan, there were 2 credit cards opened in my name in the past 18 months. One had a balance of $8,000. The other had a balance of just over $6,000. Both statements had been mailed to my daughter's apartment. The total amount borrowed in my name, without my knowledge, was $61,000. I printed everything and spread it across my dining room table, the same way I used to spread student essays before grading. I looked at the numbers the way I had trained myself to look at hard things steadily, without flinching. Then I called my neighbor, Carol, who had been my friend for 9 years and never once gave me bad advice. Carol arrived in 20 minutes with a casserole she had been making for her own dinner and the name of a lawyer written on a piece of paper. "Her name is Rebecca Shaw," Carol said, setting the casserole on my counter. "She does exactly this kind of thing, and she is very good. Call her tonight." I called Rebecca Shaw that evening. She was a woman in her early 50s with a matter-of-fact manner that I found immediately reassuring. I told her everything from the cosign to the loan to the credit cards to my daughter's admission that she had seen the paperwork. Rebecca listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mrs. Harmon, what you are describing is identity fraud and financial exploitation. It is a serious crime. It does not matter that the people who did it share your blood." She asked me to bring everything I had to her office the next morning. I told her I would be there at 9. That night I did not sleep well, but I did not cry again either. I lay in the dark and thought about the girl my daughter used to be, the 12-year-old who slept with a flashlight under her pillow so she could read after bedtime, the 17-year-old who called me from a party, scared and wanting to come home, and who I drove to get without a single word of judgment, the 22-year-old who graduated college in the rain because we could not afford the indoor venue, and both of us laughed about it anyway. I thought about all of that, and I thought about the paper she had seen, bearing my name, authorizing a debt I knew nothing about, and I understood that love and accountability are not the same thing and cannot be traded for each other. Rebecca's office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown, organized and efficient, with framed diplomas on the wall, and a small rubber plant on the windowsill that someone had clearly been taking care of for years. She reviewed every document I had brought while I sat across from her and drank the worst coffee I had ever tasted without complaining. When she finished, she looked up. "Here is what we are going to do," she said. "First, we would file fraud disputes with all 3 credit bureaus to have the unauthorized accounts removed from my credit history and the associated debt discharged as fraudulent. Second, we would file a criminal complaint with the local police for identity theft and financial exploitation of an elder. Third, Rebecca would send a formal letter to my son-in-law's attorney. He would need to find one quickly outlining the full amount of fraudulent activity and demanding restitution." I asked about my daughter. Rebecca paused. "That is more complicated," she said. "Your daughter admitted awareness of the situation. That makes her potentially liable as well, though the degree depends on what the investigation reveals about her involvement. I want to be honest with you. This may affect her directly. I already knew that. I had known it since the moment she told me she had seen the paperwork. Part of me had been hoping Rebecca would tell me there was a way to protect her, but I had spent 31 years teaching young people that choices have consequences, and I was not willing to abandon that truth now, simply because the person who had made the choice was someone I loved. "File everything," I said. My son-in-law called me the next evening. His voice was different from anything I had heard from him before. The easy charm was completely gone, replaced by something raw and slightly frightened. He told me I was overreacting. He said the loan was a sound investment that had run into a temporary delay, and that if I would simply be patient, everything would resolve itself. He said that taking legal action would traumatize my granddaughter and destroy my relationship with my daughter, and that I would regret it for the rest of my life. I asked him a single question. Did you use my personal information to open accounts in my name without my explicit consent? He told me that families share resources and that I was being rigid and selfish. I told him that my attorney would be in touch, and I ended the call. What followed was the hardest month of my life, and I have lived through a divorce and a cancer scare and the death of both my parents. What made it hard was not the legal process, which Rebecca navigated with quiet competence. What made it hard was my daughter. She called me every day for the first 2 weeks. Some days she was pleading, telling me that her husband had acted alone, that she had not fully understood what the paperwork meant, that she needed me to believe her. Other days she was cold and distant, telling me I was tearing the family apart, that I was prioritizing money over my own grandchild, that I would be sorry when I was old and alone. Once she showed up at my door with the baby, and I will tell you honestly that I opened that door, and I held my granddaughter, and I cried. But I did not change my mind. The day I came closest to wavering was a Sunday afternoon in March. My daughter sat in my living room and told me, without any anger, just exhaustion, that she was afraid of losing her marriage and losing me at the same time, and she did not know how to carry that fear. I looked at her across the coffee table and I felt the full weight of every year I had loved her. Then I thought about sitting on my kitchen floor being told I owed $47,000 to a bank I had never heard of. I told her the kindest and truest thing I knew to say. I told her that I loved her, that I would always love her, that what was happening was not my doing, but that it also could not be undone by me, that she needed to look carefully at the choices she had made and the person she had chosen to protect and decide for herself and for her daughter what kind of woman she wanted to be. She left without another word. I stood at the window and watched her car disappear around the corner, and I did not try to stop the tears that came. The civil hearing was scheduled for a Thursday in April. Rebecca had built a thorough case. She had documentation of every account opened in my name, every statement mailed to my daughter's apartment, every transaction on those accounts. She had the original cosign paperwork with its suspicious timing, the email chain containing the fraudulent application my son-in-law had asked me to fill out, and a written statement from the bank representative who had first alerted me to the loan. My son-in-law arrived at court with a lawyer who looked tired before the proceedings even began. My daughter was not present. I had not expected her to be. The judge was a methodical woman who asked precise questions and had little patience for vague answers. When my son-in-law's attorney argued that I had provided implied consent for the accounts through my general pattern of financial cooperation with the couple, she asked him to produce any written authorization bearing my signature specifically for those accounts. He could not. When he suggested that my age and the stress of retirement might have led to some confusion about what I had and had not agreed to, the judge looked up from her papers with an expression that ended that line of argument immediately. Rebecca presented the timeline of transactions on the fraudulent accounts: restaurant charges, clothing purchases, electronics, a weekend reservation at a resort. None of it bore any relationship to family investment or legitimate necessity. The $47,000 loan had been partially used to pay down personal credit card debt my son-in-law had accumulated separately and partially transferred to a joint account he shared with my daughter. The judge ruled within 2 hours. She ordered full restitution of $61,000 to be paid to me on a structured schedule with interest. She ordered the fraudulent accounts to be discharged from my credit history. She referred the matter to the district attorney's office for criminal review, noting that the evidence supported charges of identity theft and elder financial fraud. She also noted, pointedly, that the presence of a minor child in the household was not a mitigating factor in financial crimes against a family member, and that courts were increasingly firm on this point. I sat at the plaintiff's table and listened to every word, and I did not let myself feel victorious because it did not feel like a victory. It felt like the precise, necessary end of something that should never have begun. Carol was waiting for me outside the courthouse with a thermos of actual good coffee. She handed it to me without saying anything, which was exactly right. In the months that followed, I learned that the district attorney did file charges. My son-in-law eventually accepted a plea agreement that included probation, a fine, and mandatory restitution payments. I learned this through Rebecca, not through my daughter, with whom I had no contact for nearly 4 months. The restitution payments began arriving on time. Rebecca ensured that I did not spend the money. I opened a separate account and let it accumulate while I decided what to do with it. What I did, in the meantime, was start living again in ways I had quietly stopped without noticing. I signed up for a watercolor class at the community center. I started a small vegetable garden on my balcony. I went back to my Tuesday breakfasts at the diner on Magnolia Street and sat at the corner table and watched the morning and felt slowly the specific relief of a person who has stood up for herself and survived it. Rebecca and I became friends. It happened gradually, over a series of phone calls that began as legal updates and became something else. She had a dry humor I appreciated and a fierce sense of fairness that reminded me of something I had tried to model for my students over 31 years. We began meeting for lunch once a month. Eventually, she mentioned that she was thinking about starting a community workshop for seniors on recognizing and responding to financial exploitation. She thought I might have something useful to say to those groups. I thought about it for a week. Then I said yes. The first workshop was held on a Saturday morning at the public library. 17 people came. They sat in folding chairs in the meeting room and listened while Rebecca explained the legal landscape and I told my story. I did not make it dramatic. I did not perform. I simply told them what had happened to me, what I had missed, what I had excused, and what had ultimately made it impossible to continue excusing. Afterward, a woman in her late 60s approached me. Her hands were shaking slightly. She told me that her son had been asking her to co-sign for things for 3 years, and that every time she tried to say no, her grandchildren were mentioned within minutes of the conversation. She asked me what I had done when I was afraid. I told her the truth. I was afraid every single day. I was afraid of losing my daughter. I was afraid of being cut off from my granddaughter. I was afraid of being the person who broke the family rather than the one who had already broken it. And I acted anyway, not because the fear went away, but because I understood that my fear was not the most important thing in the room. My dignity was. My financial safety was. The truth was. She stood there for a moment. Then she nodded. Once, firmly, like someone making a decision. That is why I keep doing the workshops. That nod. My daughter reached out to me 7 months after the court hearing. She sent a letter, handwritten, 3 pages. She did not make excuses. She did not minimize what had happened. She wrote that the months of watching her marriage unravel had given her a great deal of time to think about the choices she had made and why she had made them, and that the answer she kept arriving at was not comfortable. She wrote that she had confused loyalty to her husband with love for him, and in doing so had betrayed the person who had given her the only unconditional love she had ever actually experienced. She wrote that she was not asking me to forgive her immediately or completely. She was asking me to know that she understood what she had done. I read the letter twice and then I sat with it for a full week before I responded. When I wrote back, I kept it short. I told her I had received her letter. I told her I appreciated its honesty. I told her that I loved her and always would, and that I believed in her capacity to become someone her daughter would be proud of. I told her that rebuilding trust was a slow process and that I was willing to begin it, carefully, at whatever pace made sense. We talk on the phone now, every Sunday. The conversations are tentative sometimes, the way conversations are when 2 people are learning how to be honest with each other after a long period of not being honest. But they are real. I would rather have real than comfortable. My granddaughter turned 2 this past October. I drove to see her on her birthday, the first time I had seen her since the months before the hearing. She ran toward me across the living room floor with the terrifying confidence of a toddler who has recently discovered speed. I caught her and held her, and she immediately grabbed my earrings with both hands. Some things you protect fiercely. Some things you simply hold on to. This past February, exactly 2 years after the morning, I sat on my kitchen floor and learned about a loan I had never agreed to. I used the restitution funds to establish a small scholarship in my school district for first-generation college students. The rest I put back into my savings account. where it belongs, in my name, protected by passwords that only I know. I still go to the diner on Magnolia Street on the first Tuesday of every month. I still order scrambled eggs and whole wheat toast and a large coffee with cream. I still sit at the corner table by the window. But something is different now. When I watch the morning unfold outside, I am not simply resting. I am here, fully, as myself, in a life I built and fought for and kept. I want to say one thing to anyone watching who recognizes something of their own situation in mine. The fear that says if you protect yourself, you will lose your family. That fear is real. I am not going to tell you it isn't, but I want you to consider something. If the relationship you are protecting requires you to give away your financial security, your dignity, and the truth of what is happening to you, ask yourself honestly what exactly you are protecting. Because a relationship built on your silence and your sacrifice is not a relationship. It is an arrangement that serves only one side. You deserve better than that. And so does anyone who truly loves you. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. It means more than I can say. Now I want to hear from you. Drop your city in the comments below. And if something in this story touched you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. There is someone on your channel screen right now who has 2 more stories I think you are going to want to watch. Don't go anywhere. I will see you in the next one.